once we have a nominee, which is, you know, the difficult part, trying to get to who the nominee is going to be. We talked today, as you might imagine, about the role that these superdelegates are going to play in this process. We talked today about the role that Michigan and Florida will ultimately play in this process. What are your thoughts about the role that superdelegates ought to play in choosing the nominee, and your thoughts about what should happen with Michigan and Florida?
Well, let me put this into perhaps a context that is important to remember. You know, because the last two presidential cycles in 2000 and 2004 chose a Democratic nominee relatively early, we forget that my husband did not win the nomination until June. That longer primaries have been, frankly, the norm until relatively recently. So I am not as worried as some people seem to be that this very exciting and close contest is still going on. Because what we both have done is to raise the level of interest in a presidential campaign that I think will bode very well for both the primary, the eventual nominee, and the general election. The rules have been set for some time, and I think that superdelegates have their role to play, just like delegates chosen in caucuses and delegates chosen in primaries. And there's never been until this year that I remember, having been involved in Democratic presidential politics going back at least until 1972, any questions ever raised about the role of members of Congress and of governors and DNC members to exercise their independent judgment on any basis whatsoever. That is the role they have been given. And I think that they were given that role for a reason, which was to give the so-called elders and the activists in the party a chance to be heard. I have every confidence that we will certainly have a nominee by June. And that nominee will be strong, and we will have a unified Democratic Party, and we will win in November. That is how I see this unfolding, and I think I have some basis for believing that.
If you are, of course, a member of Congress, the Senate, as we all know, but if you were a member of Congress and you had come out publicly in advance of an election, the primary election in your state, you represent New York, so let's say you're in the Congress from New York, and you've come out publicly to endorse candidate X in a race like this, but then the district that you represent goes the other way, and you are a superdelegate, what do you do in that instance?
Well, I think you exercise your independent judgment. Otherwise, Senator Kennedy would have endorsed me by now, since I carried Massachusetts by 15%. So I think that, you know, this cuts both ways. And the whole idea of superdelegates is they are supposed to exercise their independent judgment. Now, it can be on the basis of anything, and there is no requirement that it stay on one candidate. It can move, because that independent judgment about who would be the best president, who would be the best nominee, who has the best chance to win, is obviously going to be affected by the evolving nature of the campaign. But I think we do a great disservice to those who have a record of service, who have independent experience with candidates. You know, I'm aware of the fact that many people supporting me have been under tremendous pressure. And that pains me. It really does. Because I have long and deep relationships. You know, Stephanie Tubbs-Jones and I have introduced what has been called the platinum standard of voting reform. We worked our hearts out together to present that piece of legislation. Sheila Jackson Lee and I labored for 4 years to get the Congress to approve, the Republican Congress to approve, a bust of Sojourner Truth, the first African-American woman to be honored in the Capitol. I have relationships and friendships and working histories with so many of you, and so does Barack. So for whatever reason, people with those kinds of personal experiences, which voters don't have, They see us from afar, they come to a speech, they watch us on television, and they vote, and that is part of the process, and an important part. But the whole idea behind members of Congress and governors exercising this independent judgment is to give due recognition to their different experience. And I think we should respect that. And I have every confidence that this is going to be worked out. And we should not be weary doing good. We should know that this will work out. We will have a nominee, and we will unite behind our nominee, and we will go on to victory as long as we do not get diverted once again by the Republicans and their agenda and their efforts to divide and conquer us.